Well, when you go to jail for truancy, they don't separate you from the hardened criminals. So I took to studying the bad way.
If you think you know Merle Haggard solely as the rough-edged country music legend who scored countless hits, prepare to discover the deeper, more troubling chapters he seldom revealed. Beneath the spotlight and applause lurked a rebellious young man once deemed too wild to tame. Labeled incorrigible, he was marked as a near-lost cause bound for a lifetime behind bars. Incredibly, just a decade after stepping into San Quentin, Haggard was gracing the Grand Ole Opry stage to thunderous ovations. That meteoric rise might sound like a simple tale of hidden talent meeting opportunity, but in truth, it was a razor-thin escape from a destiny few thought he could avoid. He'd narrowly dodged deadly clashes, watched as prison mates sank into despair, and discovered music not merely as entertainment, but as survival. People who met him back then believed he was doomed to keep repeating the same mistakes, convinced he could never outrun his crimes. Yet a combination of chance, grit, and sheer stubbornness propelled him toward a future even he struggled to believe in. Today, many fans revere his hits, but remain unaware of the lethal environment he barely survived. His story isn't a polished redemption arc. It's a chaotic dance with fate, capped by an unlikely transformation that became his lasting legacy. Merle Haggard was born in 1937 near Bakersfield, California, a region that would later spawn its own distinctive country sound, loud, raw, and unafraid to tackle unvarnished truths. During his earliest years, his family lived simply, drawing hope from the promise of better times just around the corner. Then tragedy shattered that fragile optimism. At age 9, he lost his father, a devastating blow that turned a mischievous boy into a full-blown rebel. Hopping freight trains became second nature, a symbol of the boundary-pushing life he was fast embracing. Authorities watched, alarmed by his escalating stunts, from shoplifting to more serious thievery. Reform schools tried to rein him in only to discover how adept he was at slipping through cracks. By his mid-teens, he had piled up enough charges to fill a rap sheet that spelled real trouble. Rumors in Bakersfield depicted him as a runaway menace who flaunted every rule he could. People who glimpsed him playing guitar in local bars recognized his raw talent, yet they also saw a restlessness no one could contain. Eventually, the state decided enough was enough. His final miscalculation, an ill-fated roadhouse burglary, earned him a sentence of 2 to 15 years at San Quentin, one of California's most fearsome prisons. Guards there believed he'd either rot away or come back over and over, oblivious to the spark flickering inside him. In the late 1950s, San Quentin was a byword for hardened criminals and unrelenting discipline. The prison's stone walls loomed like a fortress built to break spirits. When Haggard arrived, he carried the reputation of an uncontrollable youth with nothing left to lose. He tried to maintain his bravado, gambling in secret card games and brewing potent Pruno, the illicit prison liquor that offered brief escape. Each violation risked extra time, savage beatings, or worse. Survival hinged on alliances and cunning, because stepping out of line could be fatal. Haggard even joined a group plotting to escape, fully aware guards had orders to shoot anyone making a dash. At the last moment, a co-conspirator landed in solitary, derailing the plan. Then another inmate attempted his own breakout and was gunned down in the yard. The stark finality of it shook Merle to his core, forcing him to realize that his next move could easily be his last. From there, a slow shift began. He couldn't morph into a model inmate overnight, but the seeds of change took root. Bit by bit, he saw that endless defiance was a straight path to a violent end. Music, however, offered a different route, a tiny glimmer of hope in a world devoid of second chances. That flicker ignited on New Year's Day, 1959, when Johnny Cash arrived to give a concert for the inmates. Though Cash wasn't yet the towering legend he'd become, he radiated a raw intensity and rebellious charm that connected with men behind bars. For Haggard, seeing this performer take the stage in black, singing about prison life with empathy, was transformative. Cash didn't scold them, he understood them. Merle watched in awe, feeling a kinship he'd never known, as if someone finally spoke his language. The moment reverberated inside him, crystallizing the idea that music could be more than just a diversion. It could be a reason to fight for a future. After that concert, he doubled down on practicing guitar and honing the songs rattling around his head. Still, San Quentin remained a battleground. One misstep could lead to solitary or a vicious brawl or an abrupt end. But a purpose had taken root, giving Merle something to cling to. If he could survive this gauntlet, maybe he could sing for people who understood what it meant to feel hopeless. But first he'd have to navigate the endless threats that lurked in every cell block. Among the myriad stories swirling around Merle's San Quentin stint, none is darker than the tale involving James "Rabbit" Kendrick. Prison rumor held that Kendrick shielded Merle from dire consequences during a lethal confrontation. Some accounts suggested that another inmate died and that Merle was somehow entangled, but Kendrick took the fall. The truth remains murky, lost to the secrecy of prison life. Gossip aside, Merle witnessed enough violence to grasp how quickly fortunes could turn. He also lived in the shadow of death row, which cast a paralyzing pall over the entire facility. Executions were carried out in a gas chamber not far from where he slept, and when a man's final day arrived, the sense of dread rippled through the halls. Observing that grim parade caused Merle to reflect on how little separated him from those condemned to die. This perspective infused him with a deeper determination to avoid that fate. Over time, his destructive impulses gave way to a guarded compliance. Gradually, the prison's upper ranks noticed he was no longer the constant troublemaker. He poured his restlessness into music, a fragile lifeline in a place where illusions had no place. If he followed every rule, maybe he wouldn't just shorten his stay, maybe he'd live long enough to do something meaningful. By 1960, Haggard's incremental progress paid off. The parole board, once convinced he belonged there indefinitely, voted to let him out after nearly 3 years. He walked out of San Quentin's gates a free man at 23, daunted by the uncertain road ahead. Bakersfield greeted him with wary glances and limited opportunities. Jobs were scarce for ex-cons, especially ones with reputations for violence and theft. Desperate for income, he took what work he could find, but his real solace was playing in local bars. Audiences sensed the raw honesty in his voice, the kind of authenticity that can't be faked. Singing about struggles and regrets came naturally. Word of his gritty performances spread, eventually landing in the ears of industry insiders who sensed he had something special to offer. Though overshadowed by well-established artists, Haggard pressed on with relentless tenacity. He refused to hide his past entirely, yet he wasn't eager to wave it around either. The tension between who he was and who he wanted to become fueled each performance, leaving listeners both intrigued and moved. By 1963, he released "Sing a Sad Song," a modest success but enough to open a few more doors. Industry figures recognized that his hardscrabble background set him apart from polished crooners. There was an authenticity to his delivery that had roots in real fear, real mistakes, and real nights spent in a locked cell. For a while, he tiptoed around his prison history, uncertain whether fans would abandon him if they learned he was once inmate A45200, but fate intervened again when Johnny Cash heard the rumors and urged him to embrace his story. Cash believed the public would connect with genuine hardship rather than manufactured backstories. Emboldened, Merle released "Mama Tried," laying bare the regret of a son who couldn't stay on the straight and narrow. Audiences devoured it, praising the honesty. He quickly followed with more songs reflecting on prison and redemption, forging a bond with those who also felt tainted by past errors. Far from driving fans away, his frank admissions brought them closer. Here was a performer whose music mirrored the struggles of anyone who'd been dismissed by society. Haggard's rise through the country music ranks gained unstoppable momentum. By the late 1960s, he was a fixture on radio, churning out hits that appealed to hardworking people who saw bits of their own hardships in his ballads. Branded Man tackled head-on the stigma of having been locked up, speaking for every ex-offender who tried to start over. No one else in mainstream country was writing about that life with such candor. The industry soon realized that raw truths sold as powerfully as more sanitized material. In 1972, a symbolic milestone arrived. Governor Ronald Reagan issued Haggard a full pardon, legally erasing the record of his old crimes. Official or not, Merle always carried the memories of San Quentin. They shaped his worldview and bled into every lyric. When he sang about heartbreak or desperation, it sounded genuine because it was. Listeners sensed the sorrow and relief of someone who had stared down a locked door and somehow found light on the other side. Still, rumors persisted that certain chapters of his prison life were too sordid to discuss openly. People wondered if he'd come perilously close to murder charges or if a single slip could have sent him to death row. Merle neither confirmed nor denied such speculation, letting the music speak in illusions. He focused instead on themes of regret, empathy, and salvation, weaving them into songs that cut deeper than standard country anthems. Critics praised him for speaking in a voice that many Americans heard as their own, flawed, yearning, unashamed to wear scars. Fellow musicians admired his willingness to tackle subjects that others sidestepped. Rather than sensationalizing his felonious past, he approached it with humility and gravitas, acknowledging that poor decisions carry steep costs. His authenticity not only resonated, but also opened creative doors for artists who wanted to break from the squeaky clean image many country singers projected. As the hits kept coming, Haggard returned to San Quentin at least once, this time in the role of a performer. The trip was bittersweet. The same walls that once threatened to swallow him now stood silent while he sang for inmates. They must have looked at him as living proof that a sliver of hope could be enough to spark a miracle. He wasn't naive. He knew not everyone inside those cells would replicate his transformation. Still, he wanted to show it was possible to claw one's way out of the worst pit. Standing on that stage, he likely remembered his younger self, listening to Johnny Cash and wondering if there was a place for him in the outside world. Now he was the messenger, delivering the same possibility to desperate men yearning for another chance. The full circle moment underlined just how precarious fate can be. If one or two events had gone differently, he might never have made it out. Over the ensuing decades, Haggard evolved into a bona fide superstar. Inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame and lauded with awards, he stood as a testament to reinvention. Despite the glitz, he never shrugged off his past, making clear he'd once been a lawless kid who got a lucky break. In interviews, he spoke plainly about how grief and anger had driven him to self-sabotage. He also credited the unwavering belief of certain people, like Johnny Cash, for urging him to own his story. Instead of hiding in shame, he projected that history onto the stage, forging a distinct identity that fans found both gutsy and relatable. Younger artists sought him out, hoping to capture a fraction of his honesty. He might not have championed himself as a model for prison reform, but his mere presence and his open discussion of incarceration planted seeds in the public mind. He showed that an incorrigible label could be shattered if someone found the right path. Yet he never forgot the weight of those San Quentin walls or the fear etched into his soul. He'd remember how some inmates simply disappeared, swallowed by the system, never given a chance to rebuild. He knew how fine the line was between success and ruin. A single misstep, a single vengeful guard, a single deadly confrontation, and his fate might have ended in a pine box. That awareness underpinned the empathy coursing through his music, especially in tunes like Workin' Man Blues, where he championed the uncelebrated laborer, or If We Make It Through December, which captured economic anxiety. These weren't abstract concepts for him. They were rooted in a personal understanding of desperation. Over a career spanning decades, he used that platform to sing for the overlooked, the wounded, and the ones barely hanging on. When he passed away in 2016, tributes poured in from musical giants and everyday fans who revered his unvarnished storytelling. People praised his chart-topping hits, but they also honored the man who'd carried an indelible prison number and transformed that stigma into art. He never denied the shame of his past, but insisted it wasn't the sum total of who he was. In a landscape that often prizes glossy illusions, Haggard's abiding sense of reality felt especially poignant. His songs, whether they were about love gone wrong or about the strain of living on society's margins, always emanated a rawness that reminded listeners of where he'd been. He spoke to anyone who'd ever doubted their ability to change, demonstrating how a fleeting moment of grace could spark a whole new direction. Looking back, it's tempting to romanticize his journey as if destiny always intended for him to become a legend. But the truth is, his fate dangled by a thread. He nearly lost himself to a system that rarely offers redemption. Some might argue that his musical genius would have broken through no matter what. Others maintain that without surviving San Quentin's horrors, his artistry might never have gained such profound depth. Perhaps both interpretations ring true. The steel in his voice was tempered by real fear and regret, not stage-managed drama. That genuine article propelled him beyond mere stardom and into the realm of mythic storytellers who speak to the soul of a nation. Even as decades pass, new generations discover the hard-luck poetry in his discography and feel the resonance of a man who'd seen the abyss and came back to sing about it. In the final tally, Merle Haggard's life story is a testament to the idea that even the bleakest roads can lead somewhere worthwhile. His transformation wasn't a neat process, but a jagged sequence of survival instincts, timely encounters, and the power of honest music. From inmate A45200 to country icon, he proved that an incorrigible label can be peeled away if the individual has the will and maybe a little luck. That's why his legacy remains potent. Every time Mama Tried blares through a radio speaker or Sing Me Back Home brings a crowd to tears, we're reminded of how close he came to obscurity behind prison walls. The scars he carried became the bedrock of his voice, lending an authority few artists can match. In a world eager to write people off, his story stands as a counterpoint, asserting that a broken path can still lead to brilliance. And for anyone who's ever felt trapped by the weight of their own mistakes, Haggard's example offers a simple, stirring message. Redemption is real, and sometimes it's found in the unlikeliest of places. In reflecting on that turbulent life, one can't help but note how Haggard's experiences continue to echo in modern conversations about second chances. Some see him as an emblem of what can happen when society invests in rehabilitation rather than indefinite punishment. Others focus on the improbable good fortune that spared him from worse outcomes. Yet everyone agrees that his authenticity, rooted in harsh reality, was the key to his artistic power. He channeled memories of cramped cells, looming guard towers, and the ever-present threat of permanent confinement into lyrics that felt both personal and universal. Instead of burying his past, he transformed it into a beacon for those facing long odds. And that act, of wielding a shattered history as a source of hope, may be the piece of his legend. After his hits fade, the lessons he left about resilience, honesty, and the fragile line between ruin and redemption will remain as potent as ever for all time.